So obviously today on November 9th, the 82nd anniversary of the Kristallnacht here in Germany and other European countries, we remember what happened during the Shoah and during the time between 1938 in particular and 45. And obviously it is the darkest period of German history, but also of probably human history. And what happened afterwards with the foundation of the new German state, the Federal Republic of Germany on the one hand, and the Jewish state of Israel, and this very unique and special relation, and not only relation, but friendship that was established and built afterwards, is what brings us together tonight or today. And I'm very delighted to announce now our speaker for today, who is Dr. Michael Borchard, the former director of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Israel. We all know that the Konrad Adenauer Foundation is always on the side of Israel as a political think tank. And in particular, I'd like to thank Michael Borchard for his great services while he was the director of the foundation, but also afterwards staying in touch as a friend of Elnet, as a friend of Israel, now the director of the research services at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. And recently he published a book I can recommend to all of you who read German, and maybe we find a way to translate this into English or Hebrew after this call. It's called An Impossible Friendship, or An Unimaginable Friendship, or An Unlikely Friendship, however you want to translate it, between Konrad Adenauer and David Ben-Gurion, the two founding fathers of these two particular states. And without further ado, Michael, most of us know you. If not, we will know you in less than an hour very well. Your vita is quite impressive. You have served to the former federal chancellor Helmut Kohl and many other leading politicians here in Germany. But now let me give you the floor for your introductory remarks, and then we have time for a Q&A session. And for everyone on the call, please, as usual, feel free to write questions to Dr. Michael Borchard, either in the chat or make yourself heard, and we'll make sure that we will include all these questions in the discussion afterwards. So Michael, without further ado, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Carsten. Thank you so much. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, if I may say so. I just noticed that also my friend Rabbi Abraham Cooper is in the audience here, and I'm very happy to see him. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. If I would be British or American, I would have to start my speech with some very witty quote, some clever anecdote, but thanks God, I'm just a very boring German. So I can stick to the very German habit of the so-called preliminary remark. First remark is concerning language. My relation to the English language is somewhat comparable to my relation to my wife. I love her, but I cannot and I will not control her. So forgive me if I might not find the proper words in the next few minutes. Second remark is a big thank you to my friend Carsten Owens. You know, it's the typical author's game. If you write a book, of course, you feel the urge to tell the world about it. And due to the Corona crisis, a lot of book presentations, a lot of events had to be canceled. So I'm very happy that I can at least use this occasion a little bit to raise interest in what I've been writing there. Third remark is concerning, of course, the very considerate choice of the date for this talk. Carsten, you did already mention that. I do not have to elaborate this, as you are, of course, fully aware of this. This day is the symbol for the utmost shame and guilt for our German nation. When we look on the burning synagogues and the cruel humiliation of Jews in the Reichspogromnacht. But in the same time, this date marks also the day of the brightest moments, the purest joy and the pride of our people, the fall of the Berlin Wall. That's also the day that we remember today. I'm speaking here in my house, which is in the small town of Kleinmachnow, just a couple of 100 meters away from the border of Berlin. Just a little more than 30 years ago, the wall was here and was a deadly instrument of another totalitarian regime on German soil. Fourth remark is, I think this is a very timely event. And we just heard about the role that Germany might play in the future. To my opinion, there's an urgent need to discuss the future of German-Israeli relations. And this, of course, has to do that we come nearer to the end of the Merkel administration. Angela Merkel is and has ever been and has never been, which is more good than bad news, not a very emotional person. But believe me, Israel is a very emotional issue to her. I know that. I've been talking to her about that issue quite a lot of times, and I know that is really near and very dear to her heart. So we should at least try to assess the challenges ahead. But let's talk about history a little bit. So how are the German-Israeli relations? How's the situation right now? Let me start with an anecdote, a story about the father of Zionism, which is, if it is not authentic, at least very well invented. It is about Theodor Herzl. So Theodor Herzl has been said to have done some trips to the Jewish communities, to the shtetl, and he was always under immense time pressure. So being in that hurry, he addresses the local rabbi. Rabbi, in one word, just one word, if you have just one word, how's the situation here? So the rabbi looks at him, curls his beard. For dramatical reasons, I just have grown a beard. And the answer of the rabbi is, in one word, good. Herzl seems very unhappy with that answer because he feels that there is more to say and asks again. So if you had two words, not just one word, but two words, the answer comes promptly, not good. So let us start with the good first. How could it happen that only 20 years after the horrors of the Shoah, the land in which the survivors found new hope and a future free of discrimination, suppression, and persecution, establishes full diplomatic relations with the land of the persecutors? How could it happen that today more than 75% of the Israelis, according to the polls, have a very favorable view when it comes to Germany and the Germans? Being a very sober historian and political scientist, I'm very cautious with the use of the word miracle, but this seems to be one to a certain extent. But also miracles of this kind have fathers and mothers. Without a very special combination of two extraordinary statesmen, without a very good chemistry between these two personalities, without the very specific mixture of morality and realpolitik, this miracle would not have happened, especially not that early. I'm talking about Konrad Adenauer, the first chancellor after the war, and I'm talking about the first prime minister of the state of Israel, David Ben-Gurion. Both could establish a true friendship, despite the fact that they only had two encounters. If their relation would be a theater play, this play would have three acts. The first act, or if you want the prologue, is being played 1952 in Luxembourg at a big table in the town hall of the city, a table which is normally being used for marriages. But love is not really the predominant affection that can be felt this particular day, the day at which the signature was being set under the Treaty of Luxembourg. The atmosphere is more like the wonderful Israeli-German historian Dan Diner described it, ritual distancing. All is being done to avoid the public impression of any warmth or any sign of reconciliation. Too deep was the pain of those who suffered or lost relatives in the Shoah. Too deep was the mistrust to accept what then has been called Blutgeld, blood money. Those payments that had been agreed on in the Luxembourg Treaty. This shows how much obstacles the two politicians had to overcome to make this treaty possible. If you are familiar with Israeli history, you might know that Menachem Begin and his Cherut party brought the country very near to a coup in 1952 because of this issue. It is more or less proven today that Begin was also behind it. He was one of the initiators of an attempted attack with a mail bomb against Adenauer that killed a German policeman. But also Adenauer had to tackle a lot of problems. Early polls did show that only 11% of the German public did support compensation in 1952, only 11%. And especially his finance minister warned that Germany might put too much burden on its shoulders. Both politicians, Adenauer and Ben-Gurion, proved to be very assertive. For Adenauer, this was a moral issue, as well as it was important for the standing of Germany in the world to have success here. I only have to add one little footnote here, that the widespread impression that Adenauer did all this to please his American friends is not entirely true. The USA did have a very skeptical, also critical approach here. They wanted the German government to support rearmament, and they did not really like the idea that they provide Germany in the framework of the so-called Marshall Plan with money, and that this money then is transferred to Israel. For Ben-Gurion, the Zionist and the pragmatist, it was simply clear and crucial that without that help, even if it is from Germany, the survival of his dream, the survival of Israel, could not be assured in this situation. This is why he did all to convince his people of the compensation agreement. Totally different is the second act of the play. The first meeting of the two in person on the 35th floor of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York in the spring of 1960. The birthplace of the iconic picture of the two sitting together, smiling, no symbolic distance anymore, just warmth and positive attitude. A picture which was that sensational that the press officer of Konrad Adenauer said, only a picture of Princess Margaret Rose and Nikita Khrushchev in front of the wedding altar would have been more spectacular. The fact that both met in this very friendly atmosphere had to do with trust, and that trust was connected to a top secret cooperation behind the curtains, a cooperation which Adenauer supported immensely. It started in the second half of the 50s, and which is until today one of the most important pillars of the relations between the two countries. I'm talking about the military cooperation. That is mainly in the format of weapon deals. This was extremely risky for Adenauer, one has to say. He always had to fear that if the public, especially if the Arabs, would know about that, it could lead to a situation in which these Arab states would recognize the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, and would thus undermine the claim of the Federal Republic of Germany to be the sole representative of the German people. So he had to conduct this cooperation even without the knowledge of the German parliament, which makes this, if we prefer to talk Tacheles, an illegal move. It was illegal, according to German law, what he did there. Why was the chemistry between the two so good? Why could they meet in this very warm atmosphere, despite the fact that the Shoah was only 15 years ago? Why did Adenauer risk so much? Was it only pragmatism, or is there anything else behind that? What is important to know about Konrad Adenauer is the fact that he always had an outstandingly positive attitude to Judaism. He did not only have very close ties to the Jewish community in Cologne during his years as Lord Mayor of the city, and close Jewish friends who supported him like Denny Heinemann, but he also had very positive feelings for the idea of Zionism. This is less well known. In 1927, he joined the Pro-Palestina Committee, which was the most effective Zionist organization, the front organization in Germany, and he openly supported their work. It was really a support, and it was not comparable to some Nazi supporters of Zionism who did that because they thought this might be a more or less elegant way to get rid of the Jews. So there was a lot of these very problematic attitudes, but that was not Adenauer's attitude. One could even go so far to say that Adenauer was kind of a Rhinish Catholic Zionist, because this attitude had much to do with his religious feelings. This all led to the fact that the National Socialists did not only fiercely oppose against him, but portrayed him with typical Jewish stereotypic images and caricatures, but also alleged that he was Jewish himself. The fact that he was persecuted by the Nazis, and the fact that his wife Gussi died soon after the war because she suffered from the late effects of her detention in the Gestapo prison, helped a lot to allow David Ben-Gurion to paint the somewhat problematic image of the other Germany after the war, So Adenauer was somehow a representative of this other Germany, even though he had people like Globke and others in his government later. Also, Ben-Gurion himself did not have such a negative image of Germany. One has to know that being a strong Zionist, he always valued the fact that the Germany of the Weimar Republic was a stronghold of Zionism. It is even very likely that Ben-Gurion heard about Adenauer and his initiatives to support Zionism in the Weimar years already. And secondly, Ben-Gurion was by far not as personally affected by the Shoah as his big opponent Menachem Begin was. Again, totally different, the third act of the play. The second and last encounter of the two pioneers was a very personal encounter, and it takes place during the visit of Adenauer in Israel in 1966. That time, he is already 3 years out of office, but he is, of course, still highly respected and fulfills his dream, as he calls it, to visit Israel, which is, of course, despite the fact that he is not active anymore, a highly political move. He is the first high-ranking German politician visiting Israel. During that visit, he travels to the house of Ben-Gurion in the kibbutz Sde Boker in the desert Negev. Both call each other friend. Adenauer is having his midday nap in the bed of Paula Ben-Gurion. Pure friendship, very friendly words, both calling each other great statesmen, very near to each other. This play also has an epilogue, which also proves how much Ben-Gurion was willing to do for his friend Konrad Adenauer. When Adenauer died 1 year after his trip to Israel in 1967, Ben-Gurion came to Germany to attend his funeral. Everybody in the world would have understood perfectly if he did not come, because coming to Germany also meant to reach out hands to the then Chancellor Kurt Georg Kiesinger, who had, as you know, been a member of the NSDAP and who was not free of affiliations with the Nazis. But it had to be done for Adenauer. That was the attitude of Ben-Gurion. The legacy of Adenauer and Ben-Gurion is that they opened the door between the two countries, that they built up trust, that they established two very concrete and stable pillars of the relations. And these pillars have to be named the scientific and, as I already mentioned it, the military cooperation. This encouraged Adenauer's successor, Ludwig Erhard, to overrule all objections of economists and diplomats in Germany who feared that their projects in the Arab world would be endangered, and to establish diplomatic relations with Israel 55 years ago. Adenauer started a political tradition, the tradition of German chancellors to cherish the relations between the two countries. That has been taken very serious by all of his successors, and especially, forgive me one moment for being partisan here, by the Christian Democratic successors, especially Ludwig Erhard, Helmut Kohl, and Angela Merkel, of course. When the current Chancellor Angela Merkel visited Israel in 2008, she started her trip to Israel in the kibbutz Sde Boker in the Negev. She wanted to honor Adenauer and Ben-Gurion by doing so. During that trip, she spoke to the Knesset and made crystal clear that the existence and security of Israel is a vital part of the German Staatsräson, the reason of state. You are all familiar with this very prominent quote. The relations between the two countries are, despite some political differences, extremely close today and very valuable for both sides. So, referring to my anecdote in the beginning, that's all the good news. But what about the not good news? What about the rather bad or problematic news? Well, the simple truth is that there is no guarantee that it stays this way. Tamara Orr, the head of the German-Israeli Future Forum, found a very fitting image for that. She calls this the X factor. What Adenauer and Ben-Gurion did is that they brought the two lines of the X together. Where we are now is where the two lines meet, right in the middle. But in the near future, there will be the danger that the two lines of the X will tear apart from each other again. If we take a closer look at the young generations in both countries, we can see that there are indeed clear signs of the danger of an upcoming cultural divide. Empirical research shows that the young people in Israel are becoming more religious, more nationalistic, and more militaristic, which is a mere reflection of the fact that the country still is facing numerous threats. It also has to do with Mizrahi and Ashkenazim and their relation, and the fact that the Mizrahis are not a minority any longer. But in Germany, it seems to be the opposite. The youngsters seem to be post-nationalistic, post-militaristic, and post-religious. There are only 3 cures to heal that danger. And the 3 cures are: first, encounter; second, encounter; and third, encounter. Though there are a lot of initiatives, from city partnerships to youth exchange, and Elnat is very active in exchange programs too, it still is simply not ambitious enough. Only encounter can fight a German problem that I faced a lot during my almost 4 years in Israel. The problem of German superficiality when it comes to Israel. Again, to talk Tacheles. This superficiality is wonderfully illustrated in the following joke. There's a German journalist sitting in a street cafe in Tel Aviv, eagerly typing something in his laptop. Another German journalist drops by and asks, "Hey, good to see you. I did not know that you are in Israel. You are in Israel, wow. So when did you arrive?" "Yesterday." "At what time are you leaving the country again?" "Well, tomorrow." "Wow. And what in the world are you doing here?" "Well, I'm actually writing a book." Oh, that's interesting. What is the book about?" Well, the book is about Israel." Oh, that is so interesting. So what will be the title of the book?" "Well, the title of the book will be Israel Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow." The essence of that joke is that is not a joke at all. It is a description of reality. There is not much knowledge about Israel and not the will to learn more, but this is in tragic combination with the will to strongly voice an opinion, which is in a lot of times not based on facts. And we are not only talking about the broad public, but also about those who have political responsibilities. 82 years after the Reichspogromnacht, I do not share the opinion that the Shoah obliges us, Germans, not to criticize Israel. But it is, forgive my French, our damn duty and obligation to inform ourselves about what is going on in Israel. And especially today, I have to add that it is our duty, so to say, the litmus tests of the relations, to fight against anti-Semitism. To only express consternation and dismay when there is an attack like the one in Halle 1 year ago is simply not enough anymore. And I have to confess that I'm, to a certain extent, fed up with this attitude. We need to act. First of all, it is crucial to make clear that this ghost from the past is still very much alive. A very recent study of the World Jewish Congress revealed that 27% of the Germans have somehow anti-Semitic attitudes. This has to be fought with education, but also with all the power the rule of law can provide, and maybe also with a change of perspective. This is what we might learn from the 2 forefathers, from Adenauer and Ben Gurion. How important it is to be empathic. How important it is to lift up the heavy carpet of the Middle East conflict and to see what a vibrant, what a young and exciting country Israel is under that carpet. An Israel that does not only deserve our support because of the past, but also because of the future, a future we can and need to build on common interests. Thank you.